This is 151 Spiral Jetty made by Robert Smithson in Great Salt Lake, Utah, made in 1970. It is an earthwork comprised of mud, precipitated salt crystals, rocks, and water coil. The context is the Great Salt Lake here is fed by streams and rivers, mostly the southern part of it. You can see from this NASA view that it is this green is the southern part of the lake, and it is clearly bigger than the red part up here, and it's divided along this line, which is a Union Pacific Railroad track that sits on a causeway and that divides the lake in half. More context, Robert Smithson and his wife visited Stonehenge in England and the Serpent Mound in Ohio and were inspired by those ancient land artworks. They're also inspired by the concept of these spiral shapes that can be seen in the sunflower and these plants. This shape is one that is about birth and decay. And it is one that is obviously found pretty commonly in nature and can symbolize cyclical movement in time. This spiral can also be found in petroglyphs in the area. In Utah, Arizona, Nevada area, there are a lot of rock works that have just numerous petroglyphs from earlier cultures. And in terms of context, Robert Smithson was entranced by the red color that you see here, where there's more salt. This is right now 23 times more salty than the ocean in the red. The green is the lower part of the Great Salt Lake, and it is because it is fed by fresh rivers and streams. It has become less salty. It might just be 2 times the salt level of the ocean. On the red side, that salt has been historically a great breeding ground for this shrimp. These are brine shrimp. This is under a microscope. It gets to about 1/2 inch in its adult size. There are 17 trillion of those brine shrimp in the Great Salt Lake. They're on this, as I say, the red side. And it's their eggs that are called cysts that are used for fish food, and they are used to commercially grow shrimp. The shrimp industry is huge. And so this is a mini billion-dollar industry for for Utah. I didn't change the picture, sorry. So in 1970, in terms of context, was also the first Earth Day, and the land art movement, which kind of started in the 1960s and went through the 70s, was for Robert Smithson, coincided with this project. His wife, Nancy Holt, was also a land artist, and you can see her piece right here. It's called Sun Tunnels, where these are big concrete culverts that are placed in the middle of a desert in a perfect way so that you can stand in one culvert, look through the other, and have this incredible image. She also created this piece on the Western Washington University campus that catches the astrology movements and kind of takes advantage of the rain and the fog in northern Washington, northwestern Washington. So land art movement. Okay, in terms of form, there are 6,000 tons of local black basalt rocks that are used to create this spiral. It is a coil, so that's the water coil in our materials. It creates this water coil that's 1,500 feet long, about a mile long, and it's 15 feet wide, and it winds counterclockwise. Robert Smithson videography that process of creating the spiral. And you can see here he's not actually doing the work of moving this heavy machinery down. He hired a construction company. There were lots of construction companies that want to have no part of this, but he landed one that you can see here was able to create the spiral jetty, even at a time when the water was much higher than it is now. So this is it in 1970 upon completion. And by 1972, there was a lot of water in Utah, lots of precipitation. And so this became submerged, and it was submerged for about 30 years when in 2004, it was exposed and has been exposed ever since, as the water level of the Great Salt Lake has been really declining. It's in jeopardy too. In 2002, this is this photograph, and so part of our materials are precipitated salt crystals, and that means that as the water evaporates, there's a lot of salt in the Great Salt Lake, and that adheres to the black basalt rocks, and so that's what forms the spiral jetty as well. And you can definitely see that here. You can go out and walk on it. They ask you not to take any rocks with you. They ask you not to obviously do anything to change the structure of it. But in general, Robert Smithson is interested in entropy, meaning the fall to disorder. The cycle of life and death is what he wants recorded here. He wanted this art piece to be untouched, but he wanted a record kept of its demise. So he knew from the start that this would be in a constant state of transformation. So think of the sublime view of nature from the Romantic era. I think that's what Robert Smithson is capturing here. Just this relationship between constructing something and the destructive forces of nature that will tear it down. So also in terms of form and thinking about content, we are used to art pieces being in a gallery, where a gallery controls the moisture, the temperature, the humidity of art so that it can be preserved for hundreds and hundreds of years. Look at what they went to preserve the Ardebel carpet, right? That was an amazing process. So here, this is outside a museum's purview, and the idea is that it is going to be allowed to change. Time will not stop like it does in a museum, and he only requested that it be recorded what change took place. So you would have the records. I mean, he has a video of the recreation of this, so that too can become art in a museum, but this clearly is not in a museum. So the function of this is it is an art site from which we can observe the surroundings, we can observe the effects of nature, we can appreciate the change in land, the change in land art, which is a new movement that Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty is a perfect example of. So the Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson, created in the Great Salt Lake in Utah in 1970. The year of the first Earth Day. It is an earthwork comprised of mud, precipitated rock crystals, rocks, basalt rocks that we've seen before in Nan Madol, and a water coil. It is made like a water coil.